Okay, so hecklers in the audience. So at some point in your career with speaking, you're going to be in an audience of people where you may have a heckler, you may have someone that I like to call an active participant, really kind of the same thing. So usually these will show up when you are speaking at an event, maybe at a dinner event or something that's close to or centered around a happy hour at a larger event. People start drinking and they can get a little rambunctious. And it can happen at any type of, employee event too, depending upon when you're speaking. And, then of course you could have the person that I would call an active participant, which is still kind of a heckler, because they really have a point to prove and they want to do it in front of everyone. So a few things that I tell everyone to do ahead of time is to put together some verbiage that you might kind of like something in your arsenal, a tool that you're going to put together that hopefully you will not have to use, but at least you have something put together as far as what responses that you're going to have. To a person, or just one-liners, things of that nature. Even if you're at an event and someone is getting, the speaker's getting a active participant or quote unquote a heckler in the audience, and they say something really clever, I like to jot that down because you never know when you might need that in the future. So first thing, if you do have, we'll cover the first one, somebody who's potentially intoxicated or they've had a little too much to drink, and again, this can happen. I've done events before where they're centered around like just before dinner, they'll have like a cocktail reception. Somebody's a little tipsy and you're speaking while everyone's eating, or right after they're done, and that person is still, feeling pretty brave. One of the things that I have used before, and I actually got this off of television, but I had someone who kind of I think I asked a question of the audience, and I had a guy who shouted something back at me that was, it was funny, but it didn't belong in my presentation. So I just kind of looked at him and said, nice touch, but I work alone. So I was able to get everybody to laugh again and kind of get him to back off a little bit. Usually if the attention is focused on them in a negative light, they back away, they kind of stop. If you are speaking at an event that there's going to be alcohol served, maybe before, during, or after, one of the things that I like to do is ask the meeting planner, could we potentially have a room monitor? Or someone who, if there is someone who's intoxicated or needs to be removed because of drinking, whatever, could we have them, the room monitor, remove them? Could I give them a signal? So kind of already have a plan in mind, because again, alcohol to me is never a good thing with events, but there's going to be times where you may be asked to speak and it's at a certain time that nobody else wants because of this particular issue, or because it's just a dinner event. That's when the speaker has to speak. So they need someone who can fill that slot. So if there's going to be alcohol served, talk with the meeting planner and let them know, look, just in case, if there is someone who is a little too intoxicated, could we have a room monitor? Work out a signal, and it could just be a hand gesture. It could be you pointing your finger up in the air, or maybe clearing your throat or touching your throat, like maybe 3 times or something, or patting your throat with your hand. There's a couple of things that you could do. So that way they know, hey, that person, somebody needs to say something or they need to be removed. Maybe have the room monitor come over and say, oh, sir, you have a phone call or someone needs to see you outside, and then get them outside and let someone else deal with that. Because with alcohol too, it can escalate. You don't want it to get to that point. So I always recommend talking to the meeting planner prior to that and just having a plan of action in mind. So that way, if somebody needs to be removed, they can be. Now, if you do have someone who is just being a standard pain in the butt, I know more than you type person, then there's other things that you can do. Clearly, that type of person, they're not going to remove them. They, especially if it's a larger event, the person's not, they're just being, would, like I said, what I like to call an active participant, actively participating in your presentation. Now, I had one of these at HRPA a couple of years ago in Canada. It was the HRPA show, which is Canada's version of SHRM. And I spoke in the morning, Friday morning was the last day of the conference. And my workshop had 200 people registered. Now, what happened with this, and I found out later why the person was upset and why they were acting the way that they did. But with this event, because most of these HR professionals were getting continuing education credit, everybody got one general credit just for my class. There were some prior to me that were teaching at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning that apparently I had a group of women, there were 4 of them that came in, sat together. When they sat down, they were already mad. Number one, they came in late. Normally with my presentations, I will kind of work the room ahead of time and, introduce myself. Hi, I'm Carrie Heaps. I'm the speaker. Was there anything in particular you wanted to learn today? Or, why did you sign up for this class? I just kind of, talk to the audience and I'm like, hey, if you have any questions, shout them out. Well, when it was time to get started, these 4 women came in and sat in the back of the room. I didn't have a chance to go over and say hello to them. Now, I was introduced, I took the stage and I did my standard intro because I was talking about body language and the significance of color in wardrobe and how that can affect, what you should look for in hiring decisions. And I'm not even 2 minutes in. And one lady raises her hand and I called on her. I said, yes, ma'am. And she stood up. They gave her the microphone because they had people working the room because it was so big that, they needed a microphone so everyone could hear. She gets the microphone and she goes, I don't believe in body language. I'm a recruiter. I spend all of my time having to take notes when I'm talking to people, and I don't have time and I can't continue to look up and evaluate their body language and tell anything about them while I'm interviewing them. And she hands the microphone back. And of course, everyone looks at me because I'm the speaker and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a long hour. So I just said to her, I said, you know what? I said, you are absolutely right. And you could hear a pin drop in the room. But I told her, I said, you are right, because it is difficult to read and interpret body language when you are sitting across from someone, you're trying to make notes, you're trying to ask the right questions to fill that position. But I said, you know what, ma'am, you're in the right place because that is exactly what I'm going to teach you how to do today. And I took it right back into my presentation. So have some type of verbiage ready. Usually that gets them to stop. Okay. Within this particular case, that did not happen. I think I had 2 other instances where some of the, 2 of the women that were sitting with her, we had other people who were asking questions. And I had one woman who was, I think she was Korean, and she had kind of an accent and she was talking very low, even though she had the microphone. So one of the other ladies sitting next to her said, I can't, she stood up and just yelled, nobody can hear you. So what I had to do at that point is I just kind of put my hand up, like that's enough. And when the lady was done with her question, I reiterated it. I said, for those of you who could not hear, I will repeat the question she asked, and I floated out the question, and then I went ahead and answered. So that pretty much at that point got them to settle down. So, and they behaved themselves for the rest of the presentation. So, afterwards, the one lady came up to me and it was kind of funny because she was the one who said she didn't think she would learn anything. And she told me how much she loved the color presentation and told me a funny story about somebody's tie that had a certain pattern on it, and then she left. But I found out from some of the room monitors that we had at that event that apparently those ladies were upset because they thought that the presentation, I guess they didn't take that many classes while they were there. They did more sightseeing, and they thought, well, we'll get all of our credit hours on Friday. And they thought they were going to get 2 or 3 credit hours for a class that they took prior to mine. And it turned out they only got 1. So they were going to be short. So they already, when they came in the room, they were already angry. They were already mad through no fault of my own. So, sometimes you have to kind of take the lead at that point. So a couple of things I tell everyone is that when this happens to you, it is vital you remain calm. Don't give into it. Don't be like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, or maybe this isn't for you, please leave. Just remain calm. Secondly, you need to remain in control. So kind of like what I did when I said to her, you're absolutely right. Her shoulders kind of went back like she won, which she didn't. With the verbiage that I used, it kind of, hey, this is why you're here. I'm going to teach you how to do this. So always remain in control. Have a list of phrases. Like I said, you can always write these down and just have them somewhere where if you do need them, you can utilize them. And phrases or terms such as like what I said, you are absolutely right, because you never want to engage that person and get into a confrontation or an argument, because that will completely bomb your presentation. So saying you are absolutely right or agreeing with them in some way. Then by saying, that's exactly what I'm going to be teaching today and why you're here. So have a couple of key phrases that you can come back with that will calm that person and show everybody else in the room that you are still in control. So have a couple of phrases or right words that you can use that you have prepared. And lastly, like I said, if there's going to be alcohol served, talk to the meeting planner, have a game plan for that. Hey, tell the room monitor, look, if somebody's getting too out of control, this is what I'm going to do. You're going to be watching the room so you kind of know who needs to be removed and when. I only do that in cases where there's, people have been drinking, because that can get, that's something that you don't need to be doing. That's something they should be in control of, but you need to work in conjunction with them. But have, list of phrases like what I had said before with the person who was drunk. I was like, nice touch, but I work alone. Agree with them. You're absolutely right. Here's what I'm going to be here's what I'm going to be teaching you today, or what I'm going to be talking about today is actually going to show you exactly how to do this. And then dive right back into your presentation after, like there, you just don't skip a beat at all. So everyone always thinks that they're going to panic. I find most people, you will remain calm. The right words usually will appear to you or come out of your mouth when things like this happen. So I think our human instincts kick in. So those are just a couple of things that you can do. If you do have people who are pushing it, like I said, with someone who, to me, that was inexcusable. If you can't hear the person getting up and shouting, that doesn't make it any better. Sometimes you do have to kind of put your hand up, like you're, stop. It's where they see the palm of your hand, like that's enough. Because it was rude. It wasn't something she should have done. So I repeated the question for everyone to make sure everyone could hear. And I did it. I took my voice up a little bit, 1 octane, I would say, just to express that authority that, look, this is my time to speak. This is my, what I'm teaching everyone. You need to respect that. So always have a game plan, but it's really, really, really important to remain calm when this happens. It does happen to people at some point in their career. Usually it's later, not usually the first go round, but it will happen at some point. So it's always good to have phrases and so forth in line that you could use, because not everybody that's in your presentation is going to really want to be there. Again, it could be a continuing education thing. It could be that the person, like with this lady who hates body language, doesn't want to really learn. And to me, I think it's silly. If you don't want to learn it, don't sign up for the class. But sometimes people like drama. You do have that. So yes, so with this particular one, Catherine, yeah, would you ever stop and tell people to hold their questions to the end? You can do that. I mean, with my presentations, depending upon how big of a group we have, if it's really big, I have told people just to stop me if they have questions, which with this one, I normally will take questions from the audience. I don't get that many when I'm going through it. But that's totally up to you. I mean, normally there is a Q&A afterwards, but I usually tell people that, look, if you do have a question, feel free to, to go ahead and ask that. But if someone's being an active participant, meaning I don't like this, I really don't want to be here, they're going to interrupt you anyway, regardless of what you say. They're going to raise their hand, and it's going to be obvious to everyone. You don't want to ignore someone. So go ahead and call on them. Sometimes it's better to go ahead and do that, because if you ignore them and they're waiting till the end, they've had more time to fester and get upset and really unload on you. So sometimes it's better just to go ahead and get it over with right then and there. So those are just a couple of things I would tell you with hecklers. There's not a foolproof method. I have heard, different stories from other speakers. I think Larry Winget shared a story one time. And if you don't know who he is, he's the pit bull of personal development. He's the one who wrote the book, Your Kids Are Your Own Fault, Your Life Is Your Own Fault. Very gruff guy. But he was actually speaking, it was right after the happy hour and right after dinner, or no, right after happy hour, right before dinner was his hour time frame for his keynote. And everybody in the audience was like, we don't want to hear him speak. And they were, just carrying on. They weren't quieting down. And he just went out there and told them, this is at a private event, but he just told them, he said, clearly you guys don't want to learn anything. I can't help you anyway. Good luck. And he was just going to leave. He just said at that point, it's just not worth it. So at this point, the meeting planner apparently came out and started yelling at everybody. Again, it was an employee related event. It was company. So I guess they have the right to do that. But they were telling them, this guy traveled all this way. We paid all this money, and you guys need to settle down and listen to him. So of course, when Larry comes back out again, everyone, their body language changes, their arms are crossed, and they're really mad because they're being forced to listen to him. So he kind of reiterated what he said, clearly this is not something you want to hear, and I'm leaving. So that's kind of an extreme, but that's why I always tell people with alcohol, be prepared for, it could be anything. And it might be something you might want to consider if you are asked to speak at an event and there is going to be alcohol served. That's usually evenings, obviously. And then you can kind of choose on your own, whether or not that's something you want to do. But hopefully that helps. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.